Thank you for tuning in to Grieving Voices. I am your host, Victoria Volk of The Unleashed Heart. And today, my guest is Michelle Marsh. She studied Reiki 1 and 2 as a teenager, which began her journey into wellness. And after leaving school, she went into registered nursing, where she learned the pros and cons of Western medicine. After getting frustrated with the system, she left and began down a path of learning in natural health and hypnotherapy, soon moving into coaching. Recently, Michelle has studied creative therapies and this year is delving deeper into alchemal herbalism and Ayurveda. Now a mom of 3 and wife to a wonderful, tolerant husband, Michelle describes herself as a highly sensitive person who loves to experience life to the fullest. In a nutshell, Michelle works with nature and creativity to help others grow and create change. Thank you so much for being my guest today, Michelle.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So we know each other, dear friends, for like 2 years. And this is the first time we're actually recording an episode. And I've been trying to pin you down for quite some time, but I think it's perfect timing just given all of the change and transformation that I know you've gone through in the past 2 years, but more importantly, how that change has transpired probably in a lot of ways because of COVID. And so I think I'm excited to see where this conversation goes today, but can you share a little bit about the Michelle before COVID and the impact that has had on your life, and the Michelle after COVID? And people, just to clarify, she lives in Western Australia. So
hence the funny accent. Although I think you're the one with the funny accent, to be honest.
I love it.
Okay, so Michelle, so that's a doozy question. I think Michelle post-COVID is much more accepting of the grayness of the future. So I think that's probably the biggest change, that the uncertainty of everything that's kind of gone on here has given me, in the sense that before COVID, I really liked to plan. Before COVID, I would always have a future vision of how everything is going to be. And with so many changes and so much potential for change occurring, and there's been quite a few things in my life that I was doing that has been, felt like it was ripped beneath my feet. And all of a sudden, the trajectory I was on and my husband was on, career-wise, family-wise, all sorts of things, disappeared. And in the past, when I've come across those kind of uncertain moments, or, when big changes come into life, as it does, one of my biggest strategies for dealing with that would be to sit down and replan and revisualize something into the future, because knowing where you are going gives you a sense of purpose and hope. And so the last 2 years, particularly this past year, it's like we don't know what's going to happen next, and how there's a lot of freedom that's been changed here where I live. And so it's like, it was about 6 months ago, I had a moment of being so frustrated because I kept planning and it kept kind of falling apart. Just one little announcement and it would just crumble down again, and this frustration, and then wanting to plan, but being afraid to take the next step in a plan as well because of that. And I was sitting there and I was in a meditation, and it was like there was just this gray fog. And it's like, well, I can't just keep standing here where I'm at, because you can't do that for life. Like that's a path, or staying still to misery, right? We have to move forward. That's where the growth is. but the fear of stepping into, it's like, it's the great unknown. So it's not that I don't dream and plan now. I do, but it's with the knowledge that it can disappear at any moment. And I think now in hindsight, I look back and I think how funny, because it's not like that was ever different. Life could always change on a dime. Your plans could always change. But I had a false sense of security pre-2020, whereas now it's like my eyes have been opened as to the true changeable nature of life. And it was terrifying at first, and some days it still is, and some days I really feel the loss of that certainty. But on the other hand, what a gift, because it's kind of exciting as well, like to go, ooh, the potential, instead of knowing where you're going, knowing the end of the story. It's like a great book where anything can happen. Like, yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that a little bit and go a little deeper on what you said on.
Oh, I think I lost you there. Can you hear me? You've frozen. Was that me or you?
It was me, and this happened during my training too. And it's like I'm hardwired. I'm hardwired.
Now you're back up. Yeah, it
Yeah,
went red for a minute.
I'm hardwired. Now it's showing you as yellow.
Oh, really?
Yeah, red. Well, now you're white. Okay.
I might hotspot myself. Our internet has been a little bit weird lately. I mean, I'm close to the thing node, so it should be fine. That's why I'm doing it here. But I'm just going to hotspot myself just in case. Oops, and you're back. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Mm-hmm. Oh, now it's telling me my internet's unstable.
I think it was better before.
It was bought. Okay, let's go back. I don't know. They do all this 5G stuff, and I swear they used to have any problems.
We're good, I think, now. It's showing you red, but you're good. I can see you and hear you. Am I good?
Yeah, it's just, yeah. You're showing, oh no, yellow, white. We'll just have to, you might have some editing. Ugh.
Yeah, well, I've gotten used to it. It's been, I mean, despite being hardwired, it's been an issue lately. So I don't know. But I want to just go a little deeper into the last bit that you had said when you talked about just the possibility, because I think there's so many people that could think like the negative, right? Like this isn't going to work out. It's like the worst possibility, right? So many people have that knee-jerk reaction to think of the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So what have you learned through the grief that this has brought you too? Because it is grief, change in patterns of behavior in your life and plans that get swept from under you. What have you learned, and how have you been able to reframe positive of possibility instead of fear, really?
There's definitely been grief. So a little saying that I've had in my head since I was a kid, I don't know where it came from, is there's always a way, you just have to find it. And I've always believed that, because except for when I haven't. Those dark moments. Sometimes you forget, right? But it's always kind of been there in the back of my mind. So one of the things that happened towards the end of last year in studying creative therapies at uni is that I had a trajectory from going from this postgraduate diploma that I'm doing into the masters, which would then take me into the system of being registered and being able to mingle with you know, in the medical world and things kind of in the system, I suppose. Because I fell in love with it and I'm good at it, you know, like trying to say that in the most non-egotistical way. But, you know, when you just go, oh, yeah, like it all makes so much sense to me. And I find it quite, it's a lot of work, but quite easy at the same time to understand. And so it was like having this baby kind of gifted to me, and I was just in love and I was committed to it, and it was just such a beautiful gift because I had originally said I'm going to do this and I'm going to integrate it into like my coaching and consulting that I do, what I learn, and then I had this whole new vision and pathway that I was going to go on. And then there was announcements at the end of last year that said that you have to be vaccinated to practice as that kind of registered practitioner. And we had chosen as a family not to go down that road health-wise. And it was just dream shattered in a moment. And that really, and I know I spoke to you a lot about this at the time, you know, talk about a loss of hopes, dreams, and expectations. I had such a strong vision of once I had that master's, what I was going to do with it. And it felt so real. It felt so aligned. And even talking about it now, I can feel that emotion kind of coming up. And it was like, well, what now? And I did just throw my hands up and kind of say, F you world, and I don't understand. And this felt so right. It felt so aligned. Like, you know, the spiritual side of me was really, well, the side of me trying to understand the spiritual side of me was very confused because I live my life like that. I follow my intuition. Oh dear, we've paused again. Oops, we're back. Where did I get up to? That spiritual side of me was very confused. Is that where
You're perfect.
we
That
were?
you just ended
Oh,
it there.
really? Oh, sorry.
No,
You
you're good.
froze, so I wasn't sure what happened. Yeah, so yeah, that loss made me feel very lost in myself. And it made me question everything in the sense of, you know, I follow this path of like following the whispers, I call it, you know, that intuitive, following what feels good, following what feels aligned. And here it was, I felt like the universe was just slapping me across the face and going, haha, just jokes, you know, give me that beautiful baby back, take it away from, no, just took it straight back. And all the work that I'd done and the sacrifices that I'd made, you know, financially and time-wise to do that study, and because, you know, it's been a couple of years that I've been in it, really hurt, really, really hurt. And then at the same time, being so aware of there are so many people in the world suffering so much more, you know, that there are bigger losses out there, and it could be so much worse. But then it felt like my heart was being teared up. Like, it's such a funny thing when you have a loss like that, because it's what I was grieving was never actually a reality in the first place. So going back to that saying, there's always a way, you just have to find it, that was still in the back of my head. And gradually I realized that what I have learned so far is still mine. I have not lost the last 2 years of study. It's still in my mind. It's still integrated into how I work with people in the capacity that I work with people now. And then I found another way. Then I said, I don't need the approval of that organization over there to still study and learn what I love and to integrate it into what I offer into the world. Nobody can stop me from offering my skills. I'm just not allowed to use certain words, and it's there's always a way. There's always a way. And it can be really hard and frustrating when you don't have the support that you thought you were going to have on that journey. But then there's, 6 months on from that, so many gifts in that as well that have kind of come from that big shakeup of that expectation. Now what I'm doing is so much more expansive that it would never fit in that tiny little box of where I thought I was going. So I guess moving through it, one foot in front of the other, with that mantra going through my mind, there's always a way. I just need to keep moving forward until I find that way, knowing that I'll probably go this way and then that way and up and down and around in circles quite a few times before I feel like I'm sort of trucking forward, maybe. And that's okay. That's the other mantra in my mind. It's okay. It's all okay. Every emotion, every wrong turn, every right turn, it's all okay. It's all perfect. So I suppose I have a much deeper trust and faith these days than I used to, because I can't plan.
Well, and again, like so many of us get reminded, you can plan until you're blue in the face, and I don't know, there's an expression, God will laugh at your plans anyway, or something like that. Yeah, he has the last laugh. I just filled out a survey not that long ago, or not a survey, a questionnaire to be on a podcast. And the question is something to the effect of, when was a time in your life that you had failed? And, what did you learn from it? And like the old me, before I really started my journey of personal development, especially the last probably like pre-grief recovery me would have looked at that and answered probably in the way of like really looking down on myself, right? And really I could have probably thought of things left and right to put in there. But my perspective of failure now, and I don't know if I know from what I know of you, I'm thinking you share this same thinking, is that there is no failure. It's all learning.
Yeah.
The perspective of how I look at failure, like there is no failure. And I used to, we are our worst critics, our own worst critics. And that used to be really one of the things that brought me down the most, and my self-confidence and my worth and all of that. So I think it's really important that we look at failure and really dig deep into it, of how we want to reframe that. And so what is your shtick on failure these days?
It's a really good question, because it's not something I really think about anymore. Because it's kind of like you, I used to think about how many failures I've had. And just as you were talking there, I'm like, well, I guess what's happened is I don't see them as failures anymore. I see them as launch pads. I see them as my biggest moments of growth, because I've had plenty of things which people could label as failures if they wanted to. But if those things hadn't occurred, I would not be the person I am right now. I would not feel the expansiveness and love and everything that I have here in my heart so solidly these days. I wouldn't have any of that because I wouldn't have learned how to come through. And so I suppose in the sense of how I saw things as failures in the past, whereas now I don't, I see them as growth opportunities now, which means I move through things a lot quicker. I think if, like that example that I gave with my study, if that had happened, say 3 years ago, it probably would have taken me maybe a year, 2 years to like get over it. Not over it. We don't get over things. We integrate them and we grow from them without any kind of trauma or grief occurrence. And so I think it's a reframe into a growth opportunity instead of it being a failure. And the best thing we can do is to fail again and again and again and again. And I used to read books saying that, and I would think, yeah, because then you learn how to do it right and you don't fail anymore. Those hurrah kind of books, like,
Yep.
Learn how to do it wrong, so then you know how to do it right. It's such a load of crap. Get comfortable with it and know that it's an opportunity. And yes, it's an opportunity that hurts like hell. And I can't ever see myself seeking that out and saying, oh, I hope this is one of those moments of growth opportunity.
Right. We don't ask for it.
Every endeavor, every step of the way, I'm hoping that things go smoothly and well and that it feels, so flow and, all the rest of it. But when ultimately the pain does come along, it's that knowledge in the back of your mind that you can get through it. And it's the previous failures or growth opportunities and having come through those and then being able to see those in hindsight, that gives you the courage to know that no matter what happens into the future, and I suppose this is where getting comfortable with that grayness in front of me has come from, no matter what's thrown at me, I will find a way through it. I'll find a way to integrate it. I'll find a way to find meaning in it, which I think is a big part of, coming through trauma, coming through grief, is having some sort of meaning attached to it, not to dispel the pain, because it's so important, I think, to honor that and integrate it. But the meaning gives us a sense of purpose and understanding of why we experience it in the first place, which to me is then that launch pad into the growth in our future and into better experience.
So during COVID, I know that from your, the information you shared and just being your friend, that you did experience loss during that time as well. It wasn't just the loss of hopes, dreams, and launch and integrate more of what you'd been learning.
I lost you for a moment there. Sorry. I heard loss of hopes, dreams, and expectations.
Yeah. I saw it too on my end. I know because we're friends that you experienced a loss during that transition of trying to understand that what you wanted to, this dream that you were hoping to build and launch wasn't going to happen, at least for the time being. But you did have a loss of someone you loved during that time as well. And would you?
Oh gosh, you've frozen on me, so I'm not sure if you can hear me or not. I gotcha. I can see you now. You had full bars.
Why is this happening?
So you're asking about the loss that I experienced.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was my grandfather, and it happened quite quickly and suddenly. I mean, he was, gosh, I should know this. I think he was 96. But he was still living alone and looking after himself, and, of complete sound mind. And he had a fall, and within weeks he had died. And in that time, we thought he was going home as well, because he was healing, and then all of a sudden he crashed. And the day before the funeral, the night before the funeral, there was an announcement that we'd had very hard borders in Western Australia, and COVID hadn't entered at all. So we'd had really strict no movement. There was one case, and so they locked everything down. And oh, you're frozen, so I don't know whether to keep talking or not. Could you hear me then?
You had really strict. What I did was I turned off Wi-Fi. I think what was happening is it was bouncing back and forth.
Oh, okay.
Turned off Wi-Fi, and I'm strictly on my hardwire. So
Let's see that.
the
if
night
that works.
before is where you left off.
Okay. So the night before of the funeral, there was an announcement. We had really strict borders in Western Australia, and we hadn't had COVID in our state. And so there was one case that came through, and so they locked everything down based on one case who was in isolation, and they'd identified everybody that had been in contact, which was nothing to do with me or my family or anything near us. But they locked down everything, and said that, so like lots of rules changed. One of them being at funerals that you can only have 10 people attend. And so that happened the night before. And we have a granddad was at the top of a large family. And so he was, is that working? No.
I am about to just call my company for my internet and rip them a new one. This is terrible. This shouldn't be happening. It's 2022, people.
I know, right?
It's 2022.
But it's happening more and more. Communication's worse than it was 2 years ago. There's something awry.
Terrible. This is terrible. We will get through this.
We'll get through this. There's always a way, Victoria. There's always a way.
We will find it.
Oh, no.
This.
Do you want to continue?
We're going to continue.
Okay.
The YouTube of this is going to be very entertaining, or really borderline annoying for some people, but
sorry, people.
But okay.
What did I get up to then?
Let's just, because I don't know where it cut out in between.
Okay.
So the night before the funeral.
Okay. So
take
the
3.
night. I'm just thinking I'm going to get really succinct with this story. It's good.
Yes. This is a grief podcast, and we've done nothing but laugh. Like, what?
Oh, and there's something we could talk about. Laughter and grief is okay.
Yeah. Isn't it? Yes, it is. That'd be the message today.
Yeah. So yeah, the night before the funeral, there's an emergency announcement on TV that we're going into lockdown over one case. And this case, they'd done contact tracing, they'd worked out who they'd been in touch with, everybody was in isolation, all the rest of it. But we were to have a week of yeah, shut down basically. And so yeah, as far as funerals went, we were only allowed 10 people. Mum's one of 5 children, so with partners, you know, she could attend with her brothers, but none of us cousins. And you know, there's a big bunch of us cousins, and we're a very, very close family. It was a grieving of not just the loss of my grandfather, but from the head of the family, we lost my nan, you know, 20 odd years ago. So um, it was this fear then of, is our family still going to come together? Or is it like all of it changed every dynamic of what had been a really solid foundation for all of us in that family. And I remember I was already grieving all of that. And then to hear this announcement that I can't go to the funeral, yet the football was still going ahead, was so discombobulating to like the grief then that came up from that. And so that night, like, and they said, oh, you know, we'll live stream it. And I'm like, okay. But it was kind of like, but it was so hard to really comprehend the feelings that were going on inside. And I don't think I'd ever really thought about how important funerals were. And so in the end, we made a decision. I think I was lying in bed awake. I couldn't sleep. And just so much fire, so much anger towards this politician that made this decision that made no sense to me. No sense. You know, the rest of the world by then was kind of getting on with things, and we were freaking out by one case, you know. And yeah, it just hit me. I'm like, no, I'm getting up, I'm getting dressed, because all of that process of getting dressed to go to the funeral, there's like ritual in it, and the kids are having the day off school and they are getting dressed too, and so is my husband. And I'm taking my laptop and we're going to drive. This wasn't strictly allowed, but we did it. We're going to drive, we're going to sit outside on the road in our car of where I know they are, so I can see the hearse drive in, so I can watch it on the computer and be as close as I can to that. And it ended up being this beautiful experience on one hand, and then still so much anger and grief on the other side to have not been in the chapel, because we turned up there and I'd spoken to my 3 siblings and they decided they would do the same. So we were turning up, but none of us had spoken to our cousins because we were all like, you know, a bit worried about what each other would think about breaking the rules to that extent. But we were like, we're safe, we're in our cars, we're, you know, yeah. Because we weren't supposed to do that. So anyways, we get there and the majority of my cousins had decided to do the same thing. And it was so incredible watching all of these cars line up on the side of the road with the same idea. They'd all had the same inspiration. When I spoke to them later, you know, they'd had the same kind of thing where they'd stayed up all night and couldn't sleep and they were angry. And then, you know, they got this idea to come. And I so feel like my granddad went to each of us and gave us that inspiration. And so that was really beautiful. And it was a real kind of connecting moment. But then on the other hand, yeah, it was that there was so much anger because I felt like I'd been told I can't grieve how I want to grieve. And I realized how important it is, you know, after a funeral, when a family comes together for the wake and the telling of those stories and the hugs and the weird feeling of it all, that you don't have, you know, the grandfather there who's always been like the reason why we gather, not the reason, but you know, we gather around. And so we didn't have that. And there was we were kind of like, oh yeah, well, once the lockdown's over, we'll have a wake and all the rest of it. But there was just this fizzling off. And then no one could kind of rally themselves to kind of come together and do that. And I still feel the desire for it. But when I spoke to the rest of my family, they'd moved past it. And so it was so, yeah, I don't know. I still kind of can't put a lot of words to it all and explain it, because it was, as I was saying to you before, we jumped on to record, this anger on one side, which really made me want to jump into action and be vocal on what was going on over here and all the rest of it. And then the grief, which just felt like cold, still depression. I can't move. I give up. What's the point? You know, and that what's the point was tied in with the grief of what was going on with my grandfather, and then with the grief of everything that I was seeing kind of occurring around me and how much people were getting suppressed. And yeah, it just really made me flake. But then the anger would come out in rage every now and then. Such an interesting process. Yeah.
And very much a roller coaster.
Mm.
And feeling the weight too of what you see, right, happening with people you know and love. It's not just what's happening with you, but, you know, friends who maybe lost their jobs because of their points of view, or,
Yeah.
you know, situations like that, of losing loved ones, like you too, but maybe not even getting to see them
Yeah.
before they passed away.
Yeah. Yeah. Dad's not been able to be with their wives while they're giving birth,
mm,
again, because of a health choice.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah. That's occurring at the moment, which is just ludicrous. Yeah. So there's a lot of pain and grief that you hold for other people with that. And I think when you feel, because again, this comes around to personal point of view, but when you feel like people are experiencing grief or additional grief for no reason, or it seems pointless because there's a rule, it's really hard to kind of integrate that. You know, it's different when someone gets hit by a car and you go through that grieving process and everything, but it's almost like the car's been driven purposely, or that person's been told to stand on the road or something. And it's just like, it's so frustrating. There's this desire to scream. But you've got to let go of it all, because you're of no benefit to yourself or the world or your own family. And I think after holding that frustration, and for other people, for myself, for the world as a whole, I was crunching in on myself, and I am a hermit anyways, but I was not in a good way. I lost all motivation to share any of the messages that I have. I was really struggling with that, and I was snapping at my children, and my husband and I, even though we're on the same page, we're starting to get narky at each other. And it's because it's the frustration of what's happening out here that is out of your control. And you're seeing all these people in pain, and you know, I'm that person that my friends call to tell me when oh yeah, like my husband's just lost their job, or you know, I've got a friend and they've got an amazing electrical business and I know how hard her husband's worked to build that up, and employees and things like that. And then these crazy rules come in that don't make sense. And they're like, how do we navigate this? And, you know, feeling that tear of your heart. And what ends up happening is that you're suffering and your children are suffering because of it, because you're taking it all in. And it's because the lack of feeling of control. So at some point, it was like, how do I not dissociate from this? Because that's not healthy. How do I keep my eyes open and aware to the truth and be okay?
And as a highly sensitive person, and that's kind of what I'm getting at too with this conversation, being a highly sensitive person. So, what would you suggest to people who may be feeling that way, whether they're identify as a highly sensitive person or not?
I think this is where your self-care behaviors are so important. So as you know, I've been practicing Kundalini religiously every day, Kundalini yoga, for over a year now. And it's like, so those kind of practices and journaling and meditation, reading a book, all of those things. Well, I suppose, let me categorize it. So there's some self-care behaviors like yoga, meditation, that are like muscle strengthening, emotional resilience strengthening. So they do help you to release and let go and integrate different things. But one of the really big things about them is that they are building a strength, a core, like inside, like this, and it's so that when everything is swirling around in a storm around you, you can feel your center still, instead of just being swept around in the storm. So those things, I think it's really important to have a practice, and that's hard to do, especially when you're not feeling great. But that's where self-discipline comes in, and that's having self-integrity and thinking you're worth that time and that effort. And
Your
children and your family. Yeah. Sorry, say again.
Can I ask a
Yeah,
follow-up
yeah,
question to
yeah.
that before I forget? Because I think it's really important. So what if, I actually want your thoughts on this. So it's come up recently in conversations. So like you can have a yoga practice. Let's say you have a daily yoga practice and Kundalini, whatever it is. And it's a practice of being with your body, like being present with your body, in your body, feeling safe and supported in your body, right? But what if you're not really with your feelings? Because there's a difference. You can be in and with your body, but if you're not in or with your feelings, is it in a way a form of spiritual bypassing? Or could you be thinking that you're addressing your grief or your emotions with this practice, but yet it almost becomes a stirb? Like in grief recovery, we call it a short-term energy relieving
Anything
behavior.
can be a stirb. Yeah.
You know, I've used this language with you, so you know what you're familiar with it.
But you're talking about. Yeah.
But what do you say to that? Like, yeah, you can have a yoga practice, and be within your body, but how do you be in with your feelings at the same time?
So I would say that if you're truly with your body, you can't not be with your feelings at the same time. I would say when it's a stirb, so, you know, people often use a physical movement as in that way to bypass things and to use it as a healthier band-aid than alcohol, but it's still a band-aid, right? And yes, it's spiritual bypassing, but you're not, when you're fully embodied, the mind and body are one. Your feelings and emotions, it's all one thing. So if you're truly actually being embodied, and if you're truly doing the practice of yoga, you will feel it. And I mean, this is why, you know, so often, like if I'm consulting with somebody and they're having difficulty getting in touch with their emotions and feelings just from talk, because it really works well that way. It's a, okay, let's move your body, because there's usually somewhere I can see in them that they're holding, and I'm like, okay, let's see what's there. And once they start to move it, the emotion starts to come up. And so this is what's supposed to be occurring within yoga or any of these movement practices. But there are ways, like you say, where you can move your body and even use the breath and use the mind to completely compartmentalize. And it's an incredibly clever thing to do, but humans are clever, and I'd say most people have the skill to actually do this. It's almost like it gets boxed up and put somewhere, right? But if you're actually doing the practice properly, and I think this is where intention comes into it, and you are to the best of your ability, because when we meditate, we all go off and think about dinner and all the rest of it, but you just keep bringing yourself back. You keep bringing yourself back. You keep saying, if I feel something, I will feel it. I give myself permission. All of these things are really important. There is no use going through some yoga set or even meditation. In Kundalini, we do a lot of chanting and things like that. You can get lost in them, and there is a certain sense of peace and goodness to that as well. But the attention should always be in the present moment. It's not about escaping. It's about coming in and feeling and saying, I will feel this pain. I will feel that means the physical pain and emotional pain. So I think it comes down to intention as to the difference between both, because I know what you mean. And I know we've had conversations about it before in this spiritual bypassing. And I've been extremely frustrated in the past, because some of the most, what I would have in the past called the most spiritual people I know, like highly psychic people and mediums and things like that I have known personally, have such screwed up, what I would personally call screwed up personal life and relationships. And I'm like, how does this occur? And it's because they're actually not embodied. It's because they are trying to live in this spiritual world as an escape, just like drinking can be, just like exercise can be, just like sex can be, eating, anything. It's an escape from actually feeling and dealing with what's occurring. So yeah, I think it really does come down to that, the mindset and the intention
what sparked that was I had a podcast guest who had grown up with yogi parents, but he had never learned how to grieve. He had never had that emulated for him, or to really be with your emotions and how to let them move through you and work through them. It was all just, it's almost as if, well, yoga was just this, you're just going through the motions, right?
Well, I think a lot of yoga is these days, isn't it? It's a stretching practice. I think the spiritual teachings, which is the spiritual side of yoga as a practice, is about connection. Actually, I was just reading last night because as you know, I've just started the teacher training for Kundalini. And it says in there, I wish I had my manual here so I could read it out exactly, but it says yoga is not all of these things that we're kind of saying right now. It is a relationship. It's about relationship to spirit, relationship to self, relationship to others, which means if you're in true relationship, you cannot not experience grief, right? Amongst every other emotion as well. So like, without knowing this person and his upbringing and what his yogi parents were like, I mean, it's quite possible that they actually never spoke about that type of thing. Kundalini is quite different from other yoga practices, from what I can see. It is all about being embodied, which embodied means experiencing the physical, emotional, and the etheric together. as one. But yeah, it happens. And I do it too. I think we all do it. It's
So
nice
now
to
you,
escape.
yeah, especially when life feels like a shit show, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you've touched on this now, so let's go there.
Okay.
Because obviously you must have some hopes, dreams, and expectations or
Mm.
for the future with now Kundalini. But like you said, it's whatever you go through in life, it's education. It's not failure, and no one can take it away from you, whether it is a training program or it is a per se failure perceived
Mm-hmm.
by others. So, what gives you hope for the future?
This feeling inside of me. Um, it sounds so woo and so I almost don't want to say it because I'm like, oh, how cliche. I have honestly come to a point in my own growth and development where I feel, like I said, it's that. So I've done so much work on strengthening this inner core and being of myself, that there is such a pleasant feeling there. It doesn't mean I don't get angry or scared. Just this morning, I was saying to my husband, I had a lot of anxiety coming up around, finances and things, because everything's quite changeable still. But it all seems to work out in the end. And I think what gives me hope is that no one can take away this feeling I have inside. The only way it disappears is when I let it disappear, like I did for a moment this morning. So everything's going to be okay. It's all okay. And there's always another opportunity. There's always another. I'm constantly surprised and delighted by what life can offer and deliver. So even if what I'm not envisaging in my mind doesn't come to fruition, while I will still grieve that, because like you say, I've got another vision in my mind now. While I know I would grieve that, I also know that whatever comes here has got opportunity for delight and joy that I can't even envision right now. And so whichever way it goes, it's okay. And I think that's where the hope lies now. It's which is a funny way to put it, but it's I guess in the past, hope has been in relation to wanting something so that I could be happy. Mm-hmm. That will make me happier once I have that. Whereas now it's like there's a sense of joy and connect and contentness. That's a word. In the now, and but a hope for the sparks and joy that I kind of know are going to come anyways. I just don't know what form. Along with the grief and the pain that I know will be in there as well. And it's like, okay, let's do it.
Welcome to life.
Welcome to life. Which then brings me back to like that Kundalini morning practice. That's what that feels like, right? And it doesn't have to be Kundalini yoga. There's so many different practices out there that you can get this from. It's a mixture of this. It's like your life, because it's a mixture of intense pain when you have your arms out here for 7 minutes. Like, that really hurts. But then like why would you do that to yourself? But then at the same time, there's like these sparks of just moments where everything sinks together, or you get this higher state of awareness after a bit of breath work or meditation or achievement, when the first time that you actually managed to keep your arms up there without flaking out, and that willpower. I feel like I need to let my arm down, and then your mind just going, no, I'm going to stay on that path. No, you're not putting your arm down, and you just stay there and you stay there and you stay there. That's the training, but it's also the experience of. So then when it happens in your like day-to-day life, it's like, oh no, I've come through that. How many times have I failed with my arms falling down and then I got it right? So it's like it's giving you life experience. And I think that's, again, like how I said, those types of practices are training. And man, I always think, imagine if we all grew up with that kind of training, like understanding not just the physical side of it. Like so my teacher speaks wholly and a lot about what's actually occurring internally. It's like sometimes I'll be like there and I'll be sobbing and so angry. She won't let me put my hands down. Yeah.
Life training.
Yeah. And there's lots of ways to do it.
So if people want to learn your way or want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Well, I've got kind of two offerings at the moment. So there's the Unbound Connection. So unboundconnection.com. No, it's not. .love. It's .love. I love that. Unboundconnection.love is a free website, so anybody can go onto there, and it's a community project that I'm running with some other beautiful women and lots of different contributors who come, lots of professionals and people with just worldly wisdom. You don't have to have a qualification, that have something to offer. And so they come on, they'll do a live event or record a video or provide some resources. And there's a whole library of lots of different things that can help. We just had a angel reading the other day. I've put meditations up there. We've got qigong. We've got things like sustainability practices and all sorts of things. So yeah, everybody's welcome to go and see what's on there. That's like I say community service. It's like my offering, and that feels really beautiful to do that. So that will be ongoing and building forever. And then there is Aromanosis, which is my business, and that is aromanosis.com.au. And yeah, there's a couple of different offerings in there. One which can be offered to anybody around the world is my wellbeing readings, where I use my intuition as well as my knowledge in herbalism and Western medicine and psychology and everything else that I've studied, and basically give an overview of your wellnesses, along with some different suggestions in your lifestyle, diet, and really, when it comes down to it, a lot of the time it's what people are experiencing physically comes down to the grief they are holding within, the unprocessed and unintegrated emotions. So I give some tips and kind of next steps around that. And then, yeah, I also consult with people face to face as well when the opportunity arises.
And you have teas. You make teas as well, right?
I do. Oh, thank you for saying. See, there's so many wonderful things in the world. I do. I love my teas and my herbs. My shop is not up yet, but it will be discoverable through Aromanosis, or you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at Aromanosis as well, and I will have that shop up soon with all my medicinal goodies, which I love to. When I put them together, I only ever put my my herbals and medicinals together when I am in alignment in myself. And I also like to do it in alignment with the moon and the energies of the planets. And so all of that's where the alchemical herbalism comes in. It all comes into play. And it's such a beautiful, expansive thing to do, is to sit there chanting away as you're preparing something or harvesting it or whatever stage it's at.
Lots of love infused, I do not doubt.
So much.
And I'll put the link into all of your information in the show notes. And is there anything else you would like to share?
just deep gratitude for you, my friend. I have learned so much from you about grief and the true nature of grief. I think it's we often label it so many other things, and when it comes down to it, it's grief, and not being afraid of that, and yeah, understanding the nuances around it, and this podcast that you've been doing and have the most incredible guests on that I'm just like so amazed that I am on here in the presence of some pretty incredible people. You're a true gift to the world, an absolute true gift. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for being my friend. A soul sister from another mother.
Totally.
Yeah, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for sharing. Um, yeah, I think the loss of hopes, dreams, and expectations is a loss that many people can relate to, and experiencing loss during COVID as well. And so I appreciate you sharing your story. We didn't even get into UMAP, which I wanted to try and weave that in there some way, but didn't quite fit. So maybe that's another conversation for another time. But
Next time.
yeah.
Yeah, there's so much I could say about that.
Anything like in a
Yeah.
nutshell, like what it did for you?
Yeah. So when you did that, now I'm trying to remember the timeline, but that's when I was feeling kind of squeezed. And it was towards the end of last year. So it was kind of like when all the things were going on. And at the same time, I was like, no, I'm going to find my path. I will find that way, determined. And you offered the UMAP to me. And what surprised me most about it was really bringing to my attention what my priorities were, what my values were. And so I made a decision. Actually, I do remember exactly. It was mid last year, because it was when my grandfather died. It was right at that point. And I remember I was trying to make decisions. Am I going to do this? I'm going to do that. And when I saw my values written in kind of hierarchy, and I made a decision to, I'm going to live by those, because you kind of realize that, oh, hang on, I'm putting all my attention into my fifth or sixth value. Like, what about that top one? That changed my behavior and my actions, and still does. And that was a catalyst into this this feeling of solid joy and knowing that I've got that rock hard feeling, that core that I was talking about. That was a catalyst, doing that UMAP. I couldn't recommend it highly enough to people. It's such a good way to get to know yourself, especially if you have no idea, I think. Yeah,
If you're
but
feeling
even
lost,
then,
right?
if you're feeling lost, actually, it doesn't even matter how much you know yourself. I mean, I've been doing self-development for years. I thought I knew. I was like, yeah, I already know where I'm at. There's always more to discover. Put it in black and white in front of you, and then try and weasel your way into putting your head back in the sand. It's really hard to do. So it's a gift
Right.
to have it
And
in front
it's,
of you.
yeah, and for people not
Yeah.
familiar with it, I'll link to it in the show notes, but just it's a holistic picture of who you really are that combines your
Mm.
strengths and your values and your skills and how you're wired to create this map of you. And it
Mm.
can really shape your path forward. And so thank you for sharing that little snippet of your experience with my listeners. So I'll put
Yeah,
the
you're
link to that
welcome.
in the show notes. And thank you again so much, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And remember, when you unleash your heart, you unleash your life. Much love.